Okay, so you get a look here at a truck stop late at night, like where there's a 24-hour Wendy's. It'll be weird, like stuff in places like this will be 24 hours where normally it's not, right? Wendy's are not typically 24 hours at all. In fact, they even advertise open late, like as if being open somewhat late is a big deal or a big accomplishment. But I gotta start using that ticker thing more, and then we're gonna drive back here from where I just was. We get all these obscure, random towns, small New York towns that nobody's ever heard of. Right, and the reason why is because that's kind of the lost stuff that people think when they hear New York. They don't think of these kind of areas. It's weird because it's kind of both comforting in a way, like, oh look, it's nice and peaceful, but it's also potentially a little disturbing because you'll be out kind of in the middle of this isn't quite even that bad, but there's certain areas, like you think of like a horror movie, like, oh, if you break down here, you're screwed because you're in the middle of nowhere and you're just fucked, right? Like it could be some really backwoods type area, so you don't know what can happen. Right, like there's certain areas like that I feel like you really want to be careful. In certain parts of the country, I feel like most of these areas don't rise quite to that level, but I don't know. But yeah, let me discuss a couple concepts here, and it's a situation where I had kind of a good session yesterday. That was a good, well thought out kind of a thing where I basically, went through a couple of good different topics, and I used that little ticker thing at the bottom as well. And so what happens is, basically in a position to, I don't know, can you see this if I put it here? Not really. Okay, let's just try to get to a better spot, but basically what I'm saying is that was a good example of what this should be like, where if I go that in depth, in fact I was so pissed that it kind of ended. There's certain things that happen when I'm not looking, like, oh, it'll overheat. My phone will overheat it even in the winter because the sun's out or whatever happens. Or the thing, like the battery ran out. I get up for 10 minutes to get some food. And then, the battery runs out and the phone dies. Like, really, dude? And this wind is crazy, but no, like, here's what I'm trying to tell you is that what do you call it, like like society, let me try to explain this. Nobody is credible, right? Nobody is credible. So like people are just random, aimless, mindless sheep. And so what that means is everybody is like that, not somebody. So either like nobody is credible, we're all just subjective, flawed, imperfect, etc., etc. Right? Or if somebody is held to a higher standard, then it's consistent and accountable. Like, instead we fall for like this myopic framing of like whatever. We fall for some myopic framing, and the reason why is because, right, it'll be like how they're presented to you through the media and different things, but you don't see the whole big picture. So on one hand, you should be aware, like, oh, well, obviously they're going to present themselves a certain way. So it's just a level of effort. Like, oh, some people will be lazy with how they present themselves, or not really care, or assume that you know well enough, like you know that behind closed doors they're different or whatever. Instead, oh no, somebody else will present themselves more perfectly, or be presented more perfectly by the media or by other things. Like, you know that's not the totality, and you know they're presenting themselves a certain way because that's how they want to be perceived, but you'll still take it seriously somehow as though that's absolute. And so, right, that's kind of what's annoying, is because what's annoying is the fact that, again, it's like people are dumb, and if you treat them like they're not dumb, then they get offended or bothered by it, basically. Right, because it's a situation where, I don't know. Fuck. Like, what I'm saying is the fact that, okay, this won't be too long even of a drive here, but like either everybody's credible or nobody's credible, so it's kind of like a consistency issue. And if you hold everybody truly accountable, truly consistent, if you're truly aware of everything, you'll see they're all flawed, they're all subjective. But then that's what I call the contest of contrivance, where people are competing over who can put up the best appearance and performative aspects, and like, oh, I can curate my image better, and I can kind of make myself look good to a mass of people. But the reality is, it doesn't matter, right? Like, you're competing over the appearance of something versus the reality, which is like, everybody's flawed behind closed doors. You have idiosyncrasies, you have this and that. So you're not really addressing the reality. You're just kind of competing who can put up the best appearance, right? That's kind of how a lot of things work, especially politics. It's not like the image they're presenting isn't necessarily part of what they are, but they present only that, or you see only that, right? You don't see everything else. Right, that they're flawed, they're idiosyncratic, imperfect too. And then the other part is the fact that basically, how can I explain it? It's like the initial minded perceptions that you have, and that means that people aren't really self-aware, or, you know, they're not really aware of the larger process or the big picture. They're kind of very narrow-minded. They'll kind of just see what is presented to them, basically. And so, let me actually stop here for a second, too. I don't know if some of these places are open 24 hours or not, even. Or let me not even bother. There's like this shit on the inside of my windshield that I'm always too lazy to clean, so it kind of messes up your view of everything probably too. Right, you always assume like, oh, if I do this it'll clean everything, the water, but somehow, I don't know why that happens sometimes, it'll mess up the inside of my thing. This is one invention, my Shark Tank idea, that like there should be modern headlights that don't have to be turned off from high beam, like that don't blind your other driver, because in this day and age you would think that'd be a pretty standard feature, right? Like, I should be able to keep my high beam on and not have it bother other people, but for some reason that's a hard thing to get. But no, what I'm saying is, okay, society is designed in that way, like we treat it as a false absolute, but there's no credibility because everything is outward. So for example, okay, your parents go along with the established structure, they're indoctrinated by it, etc., etc. So if you trace back the credibility, you'll say, oh, it originated by people just coming over and killing other people and taking over their land, and like that's what it is, that's how history is. But there's no real special credibility to that, is the point. So it'd be as equally arbitrary as if, oh, another group of people come over and kill them now, and then they're equally credible. So, you know, like history is written by the victors, but there's no real credibility then in anything. It's a zero-sum process. So you can argue some zero-sum functionalism, right? But you can't argue the basis of it. Like, okay, you can do the zero-sum process for the zero-sum end, but so what, right? There's no real meaning to it. There's no real meaning or special value to it. It's kind of just, arbitrary, right? So you can kind of explain the what but not the why behind it, and more importantly, you put yourself in a position where I had like a better way of explaining this, but I'm kind of forgetting it. Okay, like either, you know, nobody is credible, so like something will be pointed out in a certain way that, you know, like you'll be attacked, like, okay, you're subjective, so any attempt at objectivity that like I'm doing right here, they'll point to my idiosyncrasies or my flaws or my imperfections, and it's kind of like, if that's true, you could do that with anybody, right? It's like the anointed fallacy that, oh, there's some special people that are perfect, but that's only because of certain myopic framing or whatever, or even to some extent if they're exceptional in certain ways, that still doesn't matter, right? Like, they're still not objective or gods or perfect. They would still have flaws, idiosyncrasies, bias, whatever. So the point is, if you're going to do that and say like nobody can objectively observe anything ever, then nobody can do it, right? So nobody has any credibility, so there's no basis of society, there's no basis of authority, there's no basis of anything, right? That would be the framing, because, okay, fine, you can pick on somebody's idiosyncrasies, but that's not necessarily the point of what they're saying or observing, right? If they can just be objective on their, oh my god, what was that? Like the fucking tree, did you see that shit? What was that, dude? Fuck. This is what you get for driving back roads at night. Oh my god. That was awesome. Yeah, we got 3D effects on this stream, by the way. Like, what is all this shit, man? Like, look, there's something else falling down. What kind of back roads am I driving on? The point is that, okay, this should be at least a good straight stretch of road for a while. The thing is that, like, either nobody has credibility, or, you know, you have to hold people accountable, so it'd be kind of inconsistent. So, like, okay, if you are objective and point out the flaws of the contrivance state that you're in, it'll be like, oh, we'll attack your idiosyncrasies, and you're flawed, and you're imperfect, and you're not credible because of this, this, and this, right? That's fine, but the problem is that you're being held accountable for your reaction to the established structure and contrivance state in society, right? So you're being attacked for like observing it or reacting to it. The problem is that, what about the people who created it and who established it? Like, you're assuming their credibility, right? That's the problem. Like with the origin point fallacy, we can apply the same thing to tradition on, I would say, on the eve of Easter, but on Easter. Like, okay, you will just mindlessly do it, go along with it because it's established. But if I was to introduce a new holiday, like, oh, April 6th is some other, you know, some other holiday, you'll critically think about that and say, well, but why should we really do that? And, oh, you're just some random person coming up with it, and what credibility do you have? Right, that's fair, but guess what? The problem, oh, did it crash or something? I kind of bugged out my stream. Or you'll be in some obscure location where then I'll lose my internet, either on my phone or on my town of Throop. That sounds like something from some Dr. Seuss novel or something, or one of his books, right? Like, I don't know. But the point is that, okay, if you introduce a new holiday, people would critically think about it and say, well, why should we really do this? And you're telling us to do something, and, you know, you'll critically think and question it and break it down in detail and attack the person's idiosyncrasy. You're just some random person. Why should we listen to you? Right? You'll do that with something new, but you won't do that with the things that currently exist. Right, even if you trace it back, you'll realize, oh, it really was just some arbitrary random thing that some random people came up with, and you could attack their idiosyncrasies too, etc., etc. So it's not saying that that's specifically bad, but it just means you mindlessly accept it and don't question it and aren't actively aware of the origin point. But if the same exact tradition was established to you, presented to you now, you might question it, right? So you'll question new ideas, but not old ones. that doesn't mean the old ones are actually better or sound or absolute. It just means that you're not questioning them. Right? So they have the benefit of some preconceived bias, kind of. Right, so that's the difference between something that's accepted and something that's not. One of them you don't question and accept because you're indoctrinated in youth or whatever, or it's so prevalent and mass appeal. Collective kind of social engineering and conditioning. So that's the difference between something that you do and don't do, or you take for granted, is one of them you don't question and it bypasses your critical thinking, and the other one you do question. Right, so it's not about the nature of the process. It could be equally arbitrary. Right, that's the problem with the mass collective appeal too. A mass of people does something, so that seems to validate it. Right, versus like, oh, if you as an individual do something that doesn't. So like, you know, that doesn't actually matter because, right, like, okay, that could be anything then, right? A mass of people could do anything. That doesn't mean it's automatically good, and you can look throughout history like, oh, a mass of people in World War II Germany might have been doing something or going along with something. That doesn't make them always right or, again, absolute. Like right now in China, a mass of people go along with what? A lot of things you would question. So, like in and of itself, you would like to believe that, like, oh, social Darwinism or people are you know, how can this many people be wrong, right? That kind of thing. But it's not even about that, because the manner in which those people arrive at that state is not necessarily even of their own choosing, right? So, oh, they're heavily indoctrinated when they're young, when they're growing up, and then most people just kind of go along with it. But I'm eating a little Reese's ice cream bar. Let me review it, since I like those other ice cream bars so much. Like, this one's kind of tinier than the others, but it was a little bit cheaper, I guess, like $2. I got it from that little truck stop I was just at. So I kind of love these. The Butterfinger one was really good. The Twix one is good. I feel like the Snickers one was okay, but I'm a big fan of Reese's, so let me see what I think about it. Got a decent outside texture. I had to let it thaw a little bit. Random impromptu food review. This is what IRL streaming is all about, but I can't even really adequately show it. Oh, it's decent. It's got a nice outside texture. It's got a nice it's got a nice flavor inside, pretty basic, but the way you could compare that is kind of like, do you like it better or worse than the actual ice cream bar? Or, I mean, the actual candy, and it's like, the Butterfinger one I kind of like more, right, than the actual candy. So this one's good, but it's kind of like, even though I like the flavor, it doesn't go above and beyond. The outside is kind of, it's just kind of good. It's not great. Right, the outside is good, nice little texture to it. The inside is good, creamy, kind of peanut butter flavor. You can tell what it is distinctly, but it doesn't, I'll give it like a kind of 3 or a 4, I can't decide. It can't be a 5 though, because it doesn't go above and beyond with the nuance, but I'll give it a 4 because it lives up to the Reese's flavor, but it's missing some one little extra layer of nuance, but it is so very good nonetheless. But no, what I was saying was like the credibility checks, right? your credibility is questioned when reacting to what's established, but the people who put it in place isn't. Like, your parents won't be questioned. Like, everything they say is right and absolute and whatever, right? And the established society that they reinforce and create. But you can't question, because then you get caught in a loop then. No matter what, you'll always reinforce what you're exposed to just because you're exposed to it or whatever is established. Versus the absolutist principle that I present here, which is self-actualizing from an inherent base state. Which would mean that you can be objective despite that. Because if everything is, you're discredited because of your idiosyncrasies and etc., then everybody would be all the time. So nobody's credible, so there's no basis for structure in the first place, or telling people what to do, etc. Or there's this halfway subjective contest of contrivance, but that leads to a lot of the arbitrary outcomes. But more than that, it's like, it's a situation where that is like the perfect thing. I don't know, I was having a craving for ice cream, like, that's the perfect thing to eat, like a late at night, tired kind of a thing. That's like the food equivalent of coffee. It's like having an ice cream bar or something sugary like that. I don't really like coffee, so. Okay. So what I'm saying is, if credibility personally is a basis, then everybody can be invalidated somehow. But the other point is that never mind the fact that you could be a mindless sheep of a bread and circuses type thing, like where you're easily controlled by your base instincts at half mast, and like that's what the established structure will appeal to. Right, it'll control you through that, your own base instincts, your laziness, your inherent hedonistic thing, but some gratification in between. But here's what I'm trying to say. The point is that there would have been no basis for established structure then, or again, it means that nobody can be objective ever about anything, and all you can do is reinforce the established structure of state that's in front of you, right? No matter what it is. Again, it could be World War II Germany, it could be China right now, anything. I keep using those examples because those are easy go-to. I could use any throughout history, but I'm more so deferring to the myopic marginalization of other people. Like, I know those are two that people would instantly recognize, so it doesn't matter really. But what I'm saying is, if that's the mentality, like, oh, you grew up in this society, therefore you have to reinforce its flaws and faults, and you can't question it, and you owe back to it, and oh, you have no credibility, and oh, you have these idiosyncrasies. That'll always be true, right? All of those things. So you can never question anything ever, and you can never be objective. All you can do is mindlessly reinforce the state that's in front of you. And if that's the case, then you'll never question anything. So then, right, that's the decision you have to make, is like, right, either you look at things objectively in terms of standards, or if you specify, personalize them, then you'll compete about some appearance or something, right, not being aware of the nature of the process or of human nature or anything, and then you try to compete over it halfway, like, you know, who can keep up the best appearance or present myopic partial things it shows you like a lack of thought, right? It's like when people specify and personalize thought, it comes about like that. If people specify and personalize thought, it'll be it shows you that you must not really think very much, because after a while you'll realize, oh, you thought this, or you thought that, or you said this, or you said that. After a while, if you do it enough, you'll realize, wait a second, if you label me based on me thinking that one thing, then you could label me based on the next thing I think, and the next, and the next, and then you'll be every label at once, and you'll be contradictory labels, etc. So there's really no special meaning to it. So it basically means that you'll realize anybody can think anything, and you can be objective, and what you think and your physical state and your kind of contrived identity in society are two separate things, right? This notion of, oh, you're going to specify and personalize this to them, that's a good way to control people and label them, etc., but it doesn't really matter. Oh, they were thinking this at this time, and we label them based on that, myopic marginalization, etc. But oh, what about all the rest of the time? What about every other second? What about all the millions of other thoughts they can have all throughout their life? Like, it's pretty hard to define somebody that way, so... Or again, to specify or personalize thought. Anybody could think that same thing, and they could think anything else, right? It's not like thinking is an outward specific thing, like, oh, they think this one thing, so that defines them. No, you can be actively thinking, which people obviously, of course, are not, but whatever. So the point is that if you can't be objective, then you'll endlessly be a slave of reinforcing whatever contrivance state is in front of you, right, no matter what. So then you'll never be objective, and you'll just go along with it. And there'll be like some pseudo-functionalism in that, but that assumes the intent. In order to reinforce and do the zero-sum process as it's currently established, yes, you would have to go along with this unqualified empirical authority, and not specifically even criticizing it, but who says that needs to be done, right? So that's what this, you can always point to that, like a generation of traitors and your parents and all that. They give up, concede all power to, and all the flaws and faults of it and what's established. Instead, it's your fault for not acquiescing to it. And that sort of shows you the disingenuous nature that contrivance has to reinforce itself. It's like, it's not that they're flawed or they made mistakes or they've allowed certain power structures to come to be. It's that, it's your failure to acquiesce. So they have to bypass your critical thinking, indoctrinate you when you're young, too young to think for yourself. They have to use means validation, right? That's kind of like, we'll hold the means over your head and starve you out if you disagree with us. So kind of do it by force. We'll do it in such a way that, we'll kind of hold means over your head, means validation. We'll kind of use like this social conditioning established thing to shame you and whatnot. So what that means is that you're basically, right, that would apply kind of no matter what. And so... Right, that would apply no matter what. So it's like, it has to prey on you that way, like, it'll attack your every idiosyncrasy, but it won't be accountable or aware itself. So, right, it shows you, there is no real reason. It's kind of like, well, it's already established, so let's just go along with it. And if you don't, then that's hindering efficiency. Meanwhile, you're just doing that because it's established, so that means you would do anything. So it kind of is a monopoly over that process. Like, but you could do the same process inherently without this, but, they have a monopoly over resources or some established infrastructure, so that seems to validate them. But that validates every government ever. That validates every corporation ever because, this is a kind of the circular fallacy. Well, it's established, so it must be good, right? Things are the way they are because that's the way they're meant to be, instead of the opposite of holding them accountable, right? Because of that, it's a basic fallacy of power in general, right? People tend to have that tendency to suck up to power, right, rather than question it. So it's kind of like, right, rather than thinking like, oh, we should hold power accountable to make sure it deserves it and is doing the right thing with it. Instead, it'll be, oh no, they're in power, so that must be validated by it being powerful already. Or it's kind of like, you're accountable to it rather than it being accountable to you, right? That's kind of the inversion that happens. So there's a few fallacies to do with that are pretty basic. Or like, let's even look at the power corrupts idea that's kind of used a lot in general conversation, but sometimes people don't understand maybe fully what it means or the full implications of it. It basically shows you not so much that power corrupts, but that human nature is the same, but it's kind of just magnified by the resources that you have or the opportunities that you have, right? So it's easy to say, or let me use it this way, like nature versus nurture to an extreme, right? People are extremely controlled by their circumstances. So that's why we condition them, indoctrinate them when they're young. We control everything they do. We have rules, we have laws, we have all this kind of thing. And we somehow take those things for granted, right? And treat them as default and don't really realize, oh, that's an outward thing. So like the reason why you are a certain way is because you're indoctrinated in that manner, right? Like, so whatever is relatable or normal to you is like, oh, it's created by this artificial contrivance state, by this indoctrinated state. So like it should be no surprise then that happened. So it's not a question of whether it's good or bad, but it's a question of whether it's inherent or absolute, or again, something you take for granted, or something that you can actively question, or hold accountable, or at least understand the nature of the process and take it with a grain of salt instead of insisting upon it. So that's kind of like the emperor has no clothes fallacy that's actively used, is like your inability to take if it, like you reveal the artifice of something, like, oh, your inability to do this absolute, not that it is an absolute, that nothing is ever absolute, that it can always be held accountable, that it's always conditional on a pretense of functionalism or some safety or whatever it is. So it would always be accountable. If you could do it better, then that invalidates the process by the same measure, right? Or if you could remove the need for it, you don't require it anymore, then it invalidates it. Like, oh, it's on the basis of some negative human nature that we need this contrivance structure. So what if we conquer that and say, okay, now we prove, or we don't need to justify ourselves that we don't need that. Right, we don't need that, so then what? Right, so it's always like, oh, the basis of this contrivance is conditionally this, that, oh, you need to be restrained because of this negative nature. But then what could you do to ever remove the need for that? Right, this is why, like, religion is used, like, no matter what, you're always subject to contrivance. Even if you're the most perfect person ever, you've never done anything wrong, you never would do anything wrong, you're still subject to it anyway. Right, you're guilty until proven innocent, kind of a thing. Like, or whatever, similar things like that. Whereas the absolutists would look at it more like, okay, we accept the premise to some extent, but then we try to remove the need. Oh, it's based on human flaw, so now if we correct that, or we're enlightened to this, then we can, okay, now we no longer need it because it was based on the premise of some flaw that we had. And the same thing again, like with ability or means, like you reach a certain point where you try to remove the need for it instead of always being restricted by it anyway, even if it doesn't serve a purpose, even if it doesn't apply to us. Right, so that functional basis is there. So the mindless mass of people tend to just go along with it just because it's established, not based on any standard at all. And then, the one problem here is that, again, that same power corrupts aspect I was talking about, that, like, people are very much created by their circumstances. So, right, it'd be easy to say, like, oh, you're in a heavily inhibited, restricted state, and you just take that for granted as absolute, even though it's a construct. Like, so now, that's what it means, basically, that, you know, it's easy to say in that situation that, oh, you would never do anything like this evil dictator leader would do. But if you had the opportunity to, now it's a totally different conversation, right? If you actually had that opportunity, who knows what you might do, or it's much more predictable that you might do something more. It's more like a pretense gratification thing, like, oh, of course you'd never do that when you don't have the opportunity to do it. But like even condemning, oh, Leonardo DiCaprio or Bill Belichick dating these younger girls or whatever, oh, you would never do that, and that's a bad thing. But then if you had the opportunity to do it, who knows what would happen. So you're kind of coping with that in a way that you don't have the opportunity. Or even just like, it's a matter that again, just the means or ability to do it is more defining. And then the flip side is, again, the lazy, weak masses. Like, it would be that you would have to assume something about yourself and other people, right? The negative framing of humanity that's necessary for a contrived state to be restricted, whether it be by government, by society, by rules, by anything. You would assume that, oh, people are dumb, and people are lazy, and people are weak, and their nature is negative. Those are all the things you would have to believe about yourself and others to justify that, right? So it's kind of like, oh, you must think other people are stupid, but they must be, because otherwise, okay, if they're not, then we don't need all these rules and laws and restrictions, and right. So if you want to say that, oh, people are good, or you have like this positive view of them, that's good. But then that means we need to inhibit people less and less until not at all, right? Because the premise of that restriction is something negative about them. So like, which is it, right? You can't, on one hand, say positive things about people, and on the other hand, have this societal structure that restricts everything they ever do, which assumes that they're negative, right? So you can't really have it both ways. But then the other flip side of that is the fact that it's like, oh, don't think too much, or don't hold accountable, or don't have standards, because that'll get in the way of zero-sum functionalism. But that assumes the absolute nature of that. Rather, the absolutist would not care. Like, no, we'll do a minimalistic thing. That's where stimuli preservation is used as like a prop, and children and people are used as, again, like a prop to reinforce something. But basically, what it means is that, no, it's like, let's bring everything to a halt, and we'll self-actualize from an inherent base state, and we'll sacrifice everything if we have to, right, to make sure that it's being done in a sound way, or that we're accountable, or aware of the nature of the process, stuff like that. So what it means is that, you know, like, you're not going to be taken in by that quite so easily, or how can I describe it? Just, I can never tell if these places are open or not. Like, there's a car there, but like, are they open 24 hours or what? Like this one to the left, there's always cars there. There's always at least like one car in all these gas stations. But no, what I'm saying is that, again, you're basically putting yourself in a position where man, that ice cream thing was so good, I almost want another one. But the thing is that, and I thankfully didn't make much of a mess either. But no, what I'm saying is the fact that element at work here is the fact that rather don't let thinking or standards get in the way of the efficiency of the zero-sum process that we treat as absolute whatever, versus, you would think about that, like, no, you would rather, let's bring it to a halt and then make sure we hold it accountable or vouch for it or whatever the case may be. So that's the difference, is like, you wouldn't let that get in the way of it, or you wouldn't, right, that would be sort of the mindless mass reinforcement of something that, you would just say, oh no, but don't think too much or don't have standards, just be a mindless sheep and go along with the false absolute in front of us and never think about it. That could be fine if you vouch for the state, and then you should be living in a utopian paradise and never have any conflict of contrivance. But assuming that that's not the absolute state that you're ever in, right, in any era of human history, etc., you would have some thought and hold it accountable. But, again, it's the self-serving fallacy of like, oh, but that's not efficient for a mass collective number of people. But who said that you have to take responsibility for the mass number of people, right? You didn't create that situation. I'm even saying stimuli acme preservation, notwithstanding. So again, it's used like, oh, well, technically this is a subversive state and we're not really thinking about it, we're not holding a standard, we're bypassing critical thinking, but it's okay because, oh, there's so many people that we just mindlessly have to go along with it. Like, no, that's not actually your criteria, right? The subversion of a mass of people just because of a large number of people. So what happens is that you're basically in a position to how can I explain it? You're in a position to right, like the mass collective people would like value, let's do more things or overextend more, and we're in a rush to do the zero-sum thing that we treat as absolute, rather than stopping and thinking like, okay, maybe it's an unsound process, but you just treat it as a false absolute default. And that kind of works, but the one thing you'll protest with that is, don't preserve the stimuli acme then, and then you have control again, right? Like, okay, maybe this process is unsound, and you can actually choose or think for yourself, versus this false absolute default. We aren't aware of or in control of our base instincts, and then we just mindlessly do that, and then we use that as a basis to struggle through it. It's like, no, the choice is yours. The choice is always yours. Everything is a choice. Even in a heavily controlled, heavily subversive state, it's still kind of like, okay, what would the absolutist say? Oh, you don't have to go along with it. You might just die sooner, or you might just be ostracized, but so what, right? You still don't have to go follow it through. So it's a convenience thing. It's a deference. So it's a situation where that could be used as a basis of value right there. And I don't know how to exactly explain it. I forgot what I was saying. Just there's no actual basis of value for that, and the problem is that oh yeah, I said I wanted to even try it in vertical here. Well, it doesn't matter though for a short one like this. If I do a long one again, I'll do it. But no, it's like, again, let's rush and overextend to try to do this false absolute process. Not that it isn't absolute, or not that we could think about it, or not that you could actually have a standard behind it. So that element is like self-created, because that really is the trap, right? You're being controlled again by the stimuli acme, stimuli preservation. You have no control, because like, oh, we're struggling to put food on the table for the kids, so of course we're gonna go along with this unqualified empirical authority that we never vouched for, we never chose, right, that we have cognitive dissonance with. Of course we're gonna reinforce that, but you only have to do that because you're controlled by your base hedonistic tendencies and you preserve the stimuli acme. If it was just you, then you could choose whether to do that or not, and you could have higher standards. But instead, oh, you have children, so now you use that to somehow justify it, to reinforce the existing state that you are preserving and therefore vouching for. So that's the number one thing that kills your credibility to an absolutist, is is having children, to put it plainly. Because now it's like, you should be in a utopian state that you vouch for, and if you're not, then why did you have children in it and therefore preserve it? Preserve that state, right? Because it's more than just saying, like, okay, you could just adopt a child who already is alive, or you could sacrifice to amalgam theory and the human family and stuff like that. But instead, you do it like you do it in such a way that it's selective. So it's like the forcing nature of it is like, you could put an end to all of contrivance right now if just like, oh, this is the reset, absolutist reset of society, right? A whole generation of people just don't have kids, and now try to tell those people what to do. Right, you can't, because it's up to them. They could choose to perpetuate or extinct the contrivance state right there. Right, it's totally within their power. So this is the absolutist greatest hack, if you want to call it that. Both that and the clutch of the wrist thing, which I won't even mention, but like, that's all it would take, right? A generation of people resist their horny, hedonistic urges, or use protection, or have abortions even. Nobody have children for one generation. And then, now everything's in your control again, because, right, you can't be controlled. You could invalidate everything but instead you're controlled at half-mast by your base instincts and stuff like that. And try to get a view of like what things are actually open 24 hours. And the answer is, I really don't know, because it feels like right, it feels like very few things these days are open 24 hours anymore, which is kind of a shame, right? Blame that on COVID or whatever you want to call it, but it's definitely questionable. And you could say, oh, there's not much demand, but a lot of the time all it takes is like you just have one employee and they're kind of just relaxing, lazing around, because not a lot's going on. They could be the cleanup crew, they're just cleaning up and dealing with some minor thing. So right, it doesn't always require like a ton of staff or anything. So actually look up, like, what is something that's open. A lot of these are inaccurate too on Google. It'll say stuff is open and then it's not, or it'll show me something super far away. Right, it's definitely become a real novelty here that nothing really is open 24 hours more. Easter might affect these hours. Like, fuck, dude. I doubt that. Hey, just give me some example here, man. Fuck. It shows Target, but it's not. This one gas station is typically open like that. No, it's closed too. What the hell? Wait, what? 7-Eleven. That's weird. Okay, let me go this way and see it. Like, what are people even doing then if, like, where is this guy going? If nothing's open. You know, why would it, that'll be like a curfew thing. Oh, nothing's open, so why are you even driving? You're not allowed to do that. Like, I just want to get another of those ice creams. Now I'm getting addicted to those stupid ice cream bars, which are pretty good, honestly. Yeah, look how dessert I smash. Yeah, in a different context, I should show that. I don't know what it is, like some gaming place. Like for dodgeball or some shit. But okay, let's go for here for a little bit. It sort of shows you the uniformity of something that... Why did this guy wait so long? He didn't have to wait. The uniformity, like people mindlessly do something, or they're just used to it. So what if you do it a different way? What if you say, like, you know, just don't do it, you know? Like the night, let's say nighttime, like everybody could just reverse their schedule and do everything at night and sleep during the day, right? It'd be just that simple, but just because you're used to it, so it gives you a certain freedom, like, oh look, I can do whatever I want somewhat now. But you know, that's all it takes to kind of reverse something. People are mindlessly controlled in a uniform way. But yeah, see, laundromat open 24 hours, like, even though it looks closed. Okay, let me see if the 7-Eleven is open. But that's contradictory because that means it's open from 7 to 11, which obviously that means it's not 24 hours. yeah, we had a good episode yesterday where it was pretty long, pretty substantial. I don't know if I could do that every day, but I kind of like what it represented. We got into some very in-depth discussions. So that's really what it's more about, this whole format. Right, where it's very long form, very well thought out, very in-depth. Oh my god. Whereas this one was maybe not quite as inspired of an episode. Or it'll be like some sort of trap of that too, like, oh, it's open 24 hours, but it's like you can pump gas 24 hours, but like, wait, that means this Burger King must be open 24 hours because the gas station, or I mean the drive-thru is full. Or it'll be like, it'll only be the drive-thru's open, you can't go inside. But that in itself is odd. Wait, but he doesn't even have his sirens on. That's like a really stupid thing. He has his light on, but he doesn't have his siren on. Like, why? He doesn't want to wake people up at night? That's actually dangerous on his part. You could say I'm not paying attention, but like, you're supposed to have some sort of audible siren on. Okay, so I'm still looking for, like, let's just do the hunt. We're on a hunt for what is open 24 hours. I'm just curious, and nothing is. It's so dumb. And these Google Map things are totally inaccurate. Nothing is actually open, man. But it'll say certain things are, like, it said that 7-Eleven, but it didn't look open at all. But no, that seems like a hazard that you should, that you should have a better way of doing it. Mobile, Sunoco. The only thing that genuinely seemed open was the laundromat. Right, that seemed to be open 24 hours or whatever. I don't know, man. This sucks. I like how well lit some of these places still are, even when they're closed at night, as like some sort of a burglary prevention thing, but no, always remember social contrivance is a way to bypass critical thinking and place undue emphasis on a specific thing and sort of do it in such a way that right, like to specify something that would otherwise be an inherent process. And so the other thing you could consider is, like, let's look at one concept here I was thinking about the other day, of like being gay is considered like being happy, right? Almost like being happy would be the oh, the best way to be happy is without the constraints of the stimuli, acme, projection being on you, is like being happy without the need for sex or some sexual gratification, almost in the conventional way. Right? You can just be happy without that, or you can be thinking about and valuing something else. Right? That would be kind of the meaning of it. Like, you're not restricted by that. You're not limited to that. You don't get happiness from just that or whatever. Right? So it's like, oh, somebody can be happy and positive, and they're not just trying to get in your pants and have sex with you if you're a girl. Like, that would be somehow the framing of it. Like, you, right, that could be how you look at it. So like, oh, how do we explain that somebody's happy without some other ulterior motive? Oh, they must be gay. That's the only way it's possible. Right, because otherwise everybody's obsessed with sex and society's obsessed with sex. So, in a conventional, preconceived way or whatever. So, but yeah, this is very odd how much there really aren't any ability to again have anything be open 24 hours, just because like I want to park somewhere for a minute too, not just like get something to eat or whatever, let's say, but like you just want to park somewhere, you just want to do something briefly. Right, I don't know. These streets are so goddamn well lit though. I mean, what is this? Little overkill, man. Save some for the third world countries or some shit. But no, that's how you have to look at nature and worldwide resources. Like, it's all part of one collective. So, oh, there's 8 billion people, but look, you're getting all these luxuries, whereas other people are starving. You might want to feel gratified and, you know, donate $1 here and there, but you don't realize that your very way of life in your society is part of the reason why they're in a subversive state in the first place. And so, right, you actively support these monopolies and stuff that monopolize, these corporations that monopolize nature. So, I'm not saying that's specifically negative about one society, but I'm saying that's how modern society is. So there's like this ignorance that the mass of people play. Like, you play dumb, but you know deep down the larger process, like, oh, you're actively supporting these things that are subversive and cause a lot of these problems to begin with, right? So it's kind of self-created. Everything you do, every little thing you do actively contributes to creating and reinforcing that. Like, that's why the middle class will always play dumb, and they'll act poor and they'll act like whatever, but they don't really care about other people. They just want to pretend like they do, but like, oh, we're poor, we're helpless, we're doing this false absolute default state that's very outward, and we'll do it for our own luxuries and conveniences. The best scene I can think of from anything to show that is, again, Seven Samurai, where the villagers are acting all poor and whatever, weak, but they have like hidden wine cellars and they have hidden stuff, you know, under the floorboards or something. And it's like, that shows you the nature of it, that, you know, like, you'll always pretend that, but you really just want your own interest to be served or whatever, right? Like, you don't really care about anything, including even yourself, because you're sort of tricked to value the collective that way too. But I guess hotels are typically open 24 hours, but even then, sometimes they're not. They'll be like, you know, they'll be like, no check-in after this time or something. But like, the modern phenomenon with cameras is very interesting, that like, it is like a guilty until proven innocent thing, that like, you have to, you know, you have to do that. And the reason why is because one of the biggest malls in the whole country over here, actually, although it has somewhat of a bad reputation sometimes of like having troublemakers and stuff. But the thing is that yeah, the contrivance state is always insecure and is always trying to prey on everything, right? That it's unsound and unqualified. So it'll go out of its way and attack you and try to do that because it's insecure about itself, basically. Right, that it's unqualified. So you see that a lot with parents and stuff. They're trying to seek validation in any way, but it's not actually based on a standard. So the absolutists would be offended, not individually, like they don't really care about anything ego basis or whatever, but they would be more like, it's not a standard, like that person's appealing to ego and performative appearance pretense, but you care about the actual standard behind it, right? Whereas they're just appealing to something in a half-assed way. Like a good example is, this is what people will often do, right? They'll like focus on one thing. It's one of two things, right? They'll focus on some insignificant thing and beat it like a dead horse and really obsess over that has barely any impact. But then they'll ignore something much bigger, right, by the same measure. So you can say, oh, you spend like $1 extra on something, and oh, your parent freaks out, like, oh, look, you're wasting money. But then they'll spend $1,000 on some garbage bullshit that they don't need, right, and they won't apply the same standard, right? It's that kind of inconsistency. Or the other side of it is the fact that they'll focus on one little thing as if to validate themselves, like, oh, you'll do everything a certain way, and then they'll say something obvious that you already know, or that you already did, or that you know, that you, or whatever, that they'll say, oh, do this one thing, and they'll try to boss you around and act like, oh, look, they're doing that to try to take credit for something. Meanwhile, you did everything yourself, and it's like, right, like there's this need to sort of validate themselves, basically. Right, there's a lot of the ego insistence or competing, but never in true value of a zero-sum process. So that's the thing, like, it might seem that this is the way the absolutists would come across versus the way they actually would think, is that there's no ego in anything. Everything's arbitrary. Even if you can do something more or less efficiently, but even that is a zero-sum process. And it just means, oh, you're possessive or selfish versus not. Like, oh, if you make more money or not. Like, okay, either way, it doesn't matter. It's a zero-sum process, non-based self-interest, right? If you want more money, you work harder, you do something else. If you don't, you can be a minimalist. So it really, you're not extracting any special value from any of that. It's just do what you want to do and, you know, let it speak for itself. But there's no ego in anything. Like, oh, look at me, I'm a doctor, I'm a surgeon, I'm a lawyer, I'm Elon Musk. Even all that, on one hand, it's like an elitist standard that, oh, it could always be better, you could always do more. But on the other hand, it doesn't even matter because it's all for yourself anyway. So like, oh, this person makes more money for themselves, and so what? Like, what's the ego in that? So they just are more greedy and possessive, and they want more things or require more things. Or on the flip side, this person doesn't require as much, and they're a minimalist, and they're happy with less and whatever. So, right, like, there's no special ego or meaning in that. But the way it would be perceived or framed is like, oh, you sort of need the permission of that. Like, oh, you must be arrogant or egotistical that you don't do all these things that society would kind of force you to do or pressure you to do. And so, right, I feel like I had one other part of that, is that I say, like, basically, I don't know how I said it. by saying just there's no ego in anything. It's all a zero-sum process. You can either do it more or less efficiently. So that would be projected like, oh, this person must be arrogant or egotistical or narcissistic, but really it's that the entire process is arbitrary, and they're just kind of do everything from that. Like, oh, somehow they need the permission of ego or zero-sum means or overcompensation to not do something that's taken for granted, even though it's functionally based on the same thing, kind of dependent on the same thing. And so, right, that would be a definite consideration. And then you also have the ability to look at it from a perspective that, again, you would see there's no ego in anything versus human functions who compete over everything as though it is ego. Like, oh, look at me, I'm working harder than you, but you're doing it for your own zero-sum self-interest, and, you know, like, it should be tied to that. So why is that impressive? Somebody doesn't work as hard because they're not as greedy as you, or materialistic or possessive, or they don't care, right? And they're happy with less, and they're minimalist, and like, so you're assuming a base of value, right, that might not be present. And that comes back to the zero-sum reaction relief thing. Like, everything is just a way to relieve the base inherent elements. So there's a certain pressurized element in society that makes you sort of value things that don't actually have value or don't actually matter. Right, so that would be the basis. Like, there's no ego in anything versus, oh, the inability to do something, or the, oh, look at, like, kind of showing off about it. It's all zero-sum self-interest. It's all just same process. It could always be done better. You could be an elitist. Right, those would all be considerations to go along with that. So, right, but again, it would be projected that, oh, look at this arrogant person with a big ego, they must have done this or that, or zero-sum means, but they don't get value from zero-sum means, or they wouldn't either, they wouldn't require that, right? So it's kind of like this fallacy of permission that society prognosticates that, oh, you need the permission to do or not do something that society pressures you to do. But that's not the way the absolutists would view it. Like, you don't need permission, or, right, you would need a reason to do something or to not do it, but that would have to be justified. So you don't get value from those things in the first place. It's all arbitrary, right? You would operate value from a standard or something like that.